Rest in peace, Mr. President, JFK. Through your wisdom and strength, since your tragic death, Patriots have planned, installed, and by the grace of God, activated the beam of light. We will forever remember your sacrifice. May you look down from above and continue to guide us as we ring the bell of freedom and destroy those who wish to sacrifice our children, our way of life, and our world. We the people. Prayer said every single day in the Oval Office. JFK, secret societies. Where we go one, we go all. The old Navy days. Yeah, there I am. My name is Michael, and yes, I was in the United States Navy. Some of the best times of my life. And this will, without a doubt, go down as one of the greatest pleasures of my life. Serving with some of the finest men and women in the world. Some of these people are some of my nearest and dearest, best friends I've ever made to this day. God bless and Godspeed to each and every one of you. I can talk about this forever. Swimming and jet skiing in the Persian Gulf. Some of the most saltiest body of water on the planet. Most shark infested. With an average temperature of like 75 or 78 degrees year round.
Can't see you, dude.
Hey, I'm reading the rules and said you can't wear a life jacket on this. You don't get into safety.
Everett.
During my time aboard the USS George Washington, we took part in many different events. Notably, the day after September 11th, on September 12th, we pulled in just off of Coney Island and provided air support for the city. This would become to be known as Operation Noble Eagle. Now, notably, 11 months before this event, we had the USS Cole get bombed. That was part of our battle group. So I guess it should be noted here that the Cole got bombed first. 11 months later, we were involved with the September 11th. But before both of those, in 99, July 16th, 1999 to be exact, approximately 7.5 miles west of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, a Piper Saratoga piloted by John F. Kennedy Jr. with passengers Carolyn Bissett and her sister Lauren plunged into the Atlantic Ocean, supposedly, off Martha's Vineyard on what was a short flight from Fairfield, New Jersey, in order to make a family wedding the following day. Now again, this is the official narrative. Now before we get started here, I had mentioned earlier I was in the Navy, and by no doubt that will go down as one of the greatest pleasures of my life. And another one, without any doubt, will be the Patriot Hour. Now, I get thousands of emails a week, thousands of comments underneath the videos from some of the greatest patriots around this planet. Now, it's very clear that these people are genuine, they care, and they just want to see a better world. Which brings me to where we're at. Now, to understand this story, we need to go back a little bit. We need to just do a quick refresh of everything to bring us up to par. That way we're all on the same playing field and understand things the way that possibly they are even meant to be understood. Now, to get in the mindset of this, you would have to put yourself as a small child and your father gets assassinated while he's president. And then a few years after that, you have your uncle get assassinated, another political figure. Now, I suppose most people think that JFK Jr., from the day that he saluted his father's casket at just the age of 3 years old, to the evening his plane went down, he just went on about his business, playing the game of life like we all do so well. After all, he did live, in the most part, a relatively ordinary life, in spite of being called the Prince of America's Camelot. So what do you suppose was going on in the mind of JFK Jr.? He could have written his own political ticket, yet he went into publishing. Now, many expected him to land in politics, and most likely were a bit perplexed when he decided to publish a magazine instead. Now, some might have thought he was afraid to go into politics because of the Kennedy curse. However, nothing could be further from the truth. What he ended up doing proved to be more dangerous than any political arena. He knew that from the start, but John had a mission, and that mission was to expose those who orchestrated that dastardly act upon his father. Unbeknownst to the public, John was digging really deep for the proof. And how else could he expose the truth when all the media outlets were controlled by the very cabal he planned to expose? Enter George. When he presented his magazine George to the world, he was, for all practical purposes, some claim, signing his own death warrant. Now, the magazine George was a valid threat in a symbolic sort of way at first. Do you see? How many men named George come to your mind as just the thought of a President John F. Kennedy's assassination? Now, the cabal wanted his father dead. This is pretty much a fact. But the namesake of John F. Kennedy Jr.'s magazine, their minion, arranged it. And John, once he had all the proof that he needed, the truth would come out in his very own magazine. Do you understand this picture now? We all know President John F. Kennedy understood the predatory nature of the private central banking system. He understood why Andrew Jackson fought so hard to end the second bank of the United States. So Kennedy wrote and signed Executive Order 11110, which ordered the U.S. Treasury to issue a new public currency, the United States note. Now, this is an unfortunate story. You have a young man who knows his dad was assassinated, and then an uncle. And every year around a certain time on the anniversary date of his father, the shows would air. You have people that have given up their life to investigate John F. Kennedy. Why wouldn't your own son? He was probably curious, wanted to get to the bottom of it, and his determination, getting into the journalistic aspects, getting a magazine, and then finally getting into the political realm. There was rumor that John had obtained the proof he needed for an expose, and it was in the works, until his untimely and most suspicious death. Now, of course, the media campaigned that he was an irresponsible thrill seeker. But then they would, now wouldn't they? Now, although many people knew JFK Jr., that he was murdered, and they were right about who was responsible, they were just wrong about the reason. Now, John Jr. was warned by his family members about the risk involved in this pursuit, his pursuit of truth. But he was determined to get justice for his father and bring truth to the light, exposing the darkness that shrouds our planet. So I beg you to ask yourself, what would you do if you were a mere baby when your father, who just happened to be the most important man in the country at the time, was murdered in such a gruesome manner, and you never had the opportunity to know him? Would you just let it go? Now, this is very important to mention. Q Post 1082. POTUS and JFK Jr. Relationship. Plane crash 1999. HRC Senate 2000. The start. Enjoy the show. Q. Now, this is where the story splits. Some believe that John F. Kennedy Jr., John, faked his own death and went into hiding to expose. Others believe he did die. This is where the other part of the story comes in. Now, we know JFK Jr. and Donald Trump were friends. Now, to the level of their friendship, that remains to be uncovered. Some say surfaceable, some say very deep. And if they were friends, like we are led to believe, and they had conversations, it's probably safe to assume they had conversations about John F. Kennedy's murder, Robert F. Kennedy's murder. I mean, Trump is no skeptic to some of the conspiracies. He's actually on the record in many different ways disputing them or questioning them. Some might even say predicting them. Let's take a look.
Donald Trump is on the line. I mean, we know him as the man behind lots of real estate in Manhattan, and of course, Donald, I understand you were actually a witness to what happened this morning.
Well, I have a window that looks directly at the World Trade Center, and I saw this huge explosion. I was with a group of people, and I really couldn't even believe it. And even, I think, worse than that, for years I've looked right directly at the building. I'd see the Empire State Building in the foreground and the World Trade Center in the background, and now I'm looking at absolutely nothing. It's just gone, and it's just hard to believe. Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid, and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly, because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down. into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
BuzzFeed dug up an old quote from Donald Trump talking about a large-scale terror attack 19 months before 9/11. In his 2000 book, The America We Deserve, Trump wrote, "I really am convinced we're in danger of the sort of terrorist attacks that will make the bombing of the 1993 Trade Center look like little kids playing with firecrackers." Trump also mentioned the mastermind of the attack, writing, quote, "One day, we're told that a shadowy figure with no fixed address named Osama bin Laden is public enemy number one, and U.S. jet fighters lay waste to his camp in Afghanistan. He escapes back under some rock, and a few news cycles later, it's on to a new enemy and a new crisis." Trump.
Wait.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, hold
Yeah.
on a second.
Mm-hmm.
Is this really Trump before 9/11? Have you read this?
It's 2000 in his book.
Are we making this? Did you make
Nick.
this up, Mika?
Nick.
I did.
Did you make this up?
Yeah,
Nick,
exactly.
tell us it's over, right? Because
Will
you're
you
wrong
stop?
about everything.
Mika, stop. God.
I don't think it's over.
What's
I
that?
think
What's the
Trump and
rage here? Will you stop
No,
picking
it's
on
cute.
him?
I think it's cute.
Well,
go for it.
No, really quickly though. I mean, so Willie, that was
2000.
2000.
In a book he wrote in the year 2000. Yeah.
Well, it was published in 2000. He could have written it in 1999 for all we know.
Exactly. He might have
But
been
he-
a bit more precious.
So he basically predicted the attacks from Osama bin Laden.
It's good enough for the state of Hawaii and the State Department.
Okay.
U.S. State Department recognizes these as legitimately.
It's not a birth certificate, Candy, and people are trying to figure out why isn't he giving his birth certificate. It's not a birth certificate. A certificate of live birth, and you can see that one that you have and the one that I brought you, because that's the one that's on the internet and all over the place. It doesn't even have a serial number. It doesn't have a signature. It doesn't have a signature. One that I saw on television has a stamp, but that's not a
Because
signature.
right, but that's how they
Excuse
do
me,
these.
but that's not the one that they were showing to everybody. And I just say very simply, why doesn't he show his birth certificate? Why has he spent over $2 million in legal fees to keep this quiet and to keep this silent? When I listened today to the tape of the grandmother, and she was saying he was born essentially in Kenya, and then all of a sudden, don't forget, this is when Barack Obama was hot as a pistol because it looked like he was going to get the nomination, and they had a lot of people, a lot of handlers in there, and all of a sudden you hear people all over the room, no, he was born in Hawaii, he was born in Hawaii. But she didn't
But they
say
said
that.
it was a misinterpretation.
Excuse me, they
of that.
drowned her out. She was like, there were a lot of people in that room, and she said, Kenya, he was born right here, and then they started saying, screaming, no, you mean Hawaii, you mean Hawaii. There's
And they
a
say
lot
it's
of
a
crazy
interpretation.
things.
To his political advantage in this campaign. Claiming those billions mean he can't be bought by special interests, Wall Street, or corporate America's lobbyists. Not only that, once dismissed by the elites of both parties and leftist mainstream media, he is now a full-on threat to the American establishment, whether political, business, media, or academia. The orthodoxies, the status quo, they hate him.
In my former life, I was an insider as much as anybody else. And I knew what it's like, and I still know what it's like to be an insider. It's not bad. Not bad. Now I'm being punished for leaving the special club and revealing to you the terrible things that are going on having to do with our country.
So you can see that Trump is experienced. He's a former insider. He has all the ties. He had all the money. And he had tons of power. With those kinds of resources, you can pretty much find out anything you want. Now, this is where it gets a little murky, and there's a lot of opinion. There are sources out on the internet for some of it, but again, nothing can really be verified. Now, did John F. Kennedy Jr. die that day, or did he fake his own death and go into hiding? after discovering some kind of bomb-type device on his plane and knowing that if he came out in the news that he found a bomb, then they'd just be another attempt at another date in the future. They'd never go away. And was Trump working with him at the time, listening to John and all of his theories and really intrigued himself? Did Trump take over the helm if JFK Jr. did die? This is where it all gets murky and you really can't get any fact. You can only speculate. But one thing is true, that Trump is definitely up to something. Now, according to many different investigative reports, Trump was approached several years ago by a group of patriotic generals, and he was recruited by military intelligence to run in the 2016 presidential election. He was going to help remove the corrupt deep state officials from their positions of power and expose all the corruption of these officials involved in a history of treasonous actions against the U.S. Republic. So military intelligence got with Trump. Trump agreed he would run, and they agreed that if he would run, they would conduct their coup d'etat as a legitimate process, rooting out all the traitors within our U.S. government. And then in doing so, help fix a lot of the problems in the world today. Does Trump know things? Is Trump doing the right thing? I guess only time can tell. We're following along closely to the full picture. If you start listening to his speeches, even the ones in the past, you hear him use words like "we the people," take power away from DC and give it back to you, the people. Just look no further than to his tweets. He talks about the Fed Reserve, the power they have and they shouldn't, and we need to give it back to the people. These are dangerous words amongst the secret society members, those that have control, the Luciferian agenda. I guess I can say this much. For all of you out there, for everybody that studied the New World Order, the whole system that's entrenched in that, we think we figured it all out, we knew it all. And what we hoped for was an outsider to come in, somebody that wasn't part of the political realm, the system. And we might have that for the very first time in a really long time. A former insider, somebody that knew all the tricks because he used to pull them. Somebody that can be like a virus from the inside out. Because this, my friends, is what it would take. The story goes he was put down the QAnon path several years ago. Similar to what we're getting is like a 2.0 version. Trump learned it all, dialed it in, and they have all the safeguards in place. Now again, time will tell. We're going to keep following this story. I hope you will join us. Again, I'm Michael. This is a Patriot Hour. God bless, Godspeed to each and every one of you worldwide. Where we go one, we go all. Alright, I don't know if this is true or not, but it's definitely worth reading and hearing. I'm not endorsing it, I'm just exposing it. You will have to decide for yourself how to make the swamp believe that they killed you. There were many silent patriots serving as security around the assassinated president's son all through his life. Some watched from afar. These patriots are also in every level of government and military, quietly observing, waiting. The day came when his security found a thin strip of putty wrapped around the fuselage of his airplane. It was C4, with an altitude trigger. As the plane goes up to X altitude, the trigger is armed. When the plane drops back down to land, the explosives are set off at an X altitude. The back of the plane would be blown off, forcing the plane to dive, giving no electronic record of what happened, the appearance of pilot error. The swamp would then use the Coast Guard, Navy, MSN, etc. to complete the accident. But the swamp had to wait until JFK decided to fly. He had time to plan. That plane took off on July 16th of 1999. It was still rigged to explode, but a remote trigger replaced the altitude trigger. A Navy pilot flew JFK Jr.'s plane armed with a parachute and a tape recorder. Playing the voice of JFK Jr., he radioed the tower at Martha's Vineyard to land. After jumping from the plane, he hits the remote. Boom! Plane goes down. Patriots in the military recover the bodies. Navy divers had 8 hours of video recording the rescue. The tapes are missing. No proof of the bodies recovered. Navy divers relocated after the search. Cremated remains at the funeral held on Navy ship. Only 17 people attended the service.